Truth. If you really want to know what's going on in the world, you're being propagandized to believe it's this country versus this country. It's very simple. It's always been a war against Christ. Everything makes sense when you understand that it's a war against Christ.
Hey everybody, Michael Matt for the Remnant Underground. This is Thanksgiving weekend. Happy Thanksgiving. I think we did put a message out of gratitude, but man, this year there's been a lot of tension, and there's been a lot of reasons to be very grateful for everybody just sticking together, getting through this thing. There's ups and downs with the election and everything else. So I think I put a message out on our website, remnantnewspaper.com, and I really, from the bottom of my heart, I'm so grateful to everything that we've learned together, everything that we're finding out, discovering, the conversations that we're having, they make us a lot stronger in a very uncertain period now going forward. It's not the end of the war by any stretch, but I wanted to start today by saying thank you, and also by just doing something a little different. I'm with my family. I assume most of you are taking some time off being with your family this weekend. So I thought what we would do is just release the address, the really, really excellent address that was given by CANDACE Owens at the Catholic Identity Conference just a few months ago in Pittsburgh. Lots of reasons. I'm going to get into that in a minute as to why I think it's really important. If you have young people, young converts, young people you're trying to convert, even your own sons and daughters, friends, whatever, 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, I want you to watch this and watch it carefully, because there's a lot in there. There's a ton that Candace gets into about the awakening and the crusade and the truth and what really matters, even in a political year, what really, really matters, that I hope you'll share all around especially with young people this week. But first, I want to talk about a little bit of news here at the Remnant, and that is everybody's been asking, what about Remnant tours? What's going to happen with the Chartres Pilgrimage? The Chartres Pilgrimage is, of course, going to happen again. I think this is our 34th time, Tess? 34th time, 34 years that I've walked this pilgrimage. It gets better, more strong, more powerful every year. A little bit of the bad news, I think. There was some hope that we might begin the pilgrimage at Notre Dame in Paris. That's not going to happen. It's just everything's too new. They're not even open yet for business, as it were. As we reported a few weeks ago, you can see, I think Walter's got up on the screen right now, as we're driving by, that's our bus, we're driving by talking about the pilgrimage and talking about the cathedral. At that point, it seemed a little bit uncertain what was going to happen, but as we said at the time, French pride being what it is, we firmly were convinced that they were going to restore the cathedral to its former glory. That's exactly what they've done. In fact, it's more beautiful and more gorgeous than anyone's seen it in hundreds of years. They did the same thing over in Chartres. This is why I was positive they were going to do the same in Paris. Yes, there's a modern table there. Of course, all those things can be blown away. The important thing is, structurally, from an architectural point of view, they've restored it. They found old frescoes under the years and years, hundreds of years of soot and grime from candles and so forth. It's just, I can't wait to see it. It looks like a jewel. So we're going to get into there when we go over to Paris for the Pentecost pilgrimage in 2025. We will visit it, but that will not be the starting point. The starting point will be Saint-Sulpice, as it's been for the past few years, which is the second largest cathedral in Paris, or church in Paris, and truly a beautiful one. After that, it's a little bit unsure where we're going to go, but where we're going to go for sure is the south of France. Where we're going to go for sure is down to Lourdes, where Our Lady appeared to Saint Bernadette. And gave us the doctrine, or the doctrine of the Immaculate Conception. So we're going to visit Lourdes again, up in the Pyrenees, most beautiful part of France as far as I'm concerned. But if you're willing to take a little bit of a risk and sign up early, this thing always sells out like within a few weeks. So check our website, remnantnewspaper.com, Chartres Pilgrimage USA as well, on Tuesday, and go ahead and sign up. Okay, so let's get on to this Candace Owens issue. We're always looking. We are always looking to unite the clans, not unite the saints, not unite the holy people, not unite the perfect people just like us. You know what I mean? It's the clans. The clans are a gritty bunch. They're people just like us, living behind enemy lines, eking out their salvation. They're sick and tired of what's going on. They're tired of the Barbra Streisand, right? And they're trying to find ways to fight. And we've always done this. We're still doing it now. We've just made a movement out of it. Always looking for each other. Always looking for people waking up. And this is even different than sometimes we'll quote Rogan or we'll quote Bill Maher or something. And people say, oh my gosh, how can you do that? Okay, well, we quote them because they're saying things that help us push our agenda, even though, and especially because, they're on the left and they're not us, right? Now Candace Owens is something different. Candace Owens, she's come all the way over. And that doesn't mean that we agree with everything she says. Here's the thing. Somebody like Candace Owens is young. She figured it out. She was a liberal for a long time, as she's going to explain to you in a few moments here. Been a liberal for most of her life. She figured it out, and then all of a sudden she's like, man, they have been lying to us constantly for so many years, all of our lives. And so they start peeling back the onions. I met this personality before, although Candace does it in spades. She's very good at it. She starts peeling back the onions. She's like, oh my gosh, everything's a lie. They've been lying forever about almost everything. So this is the thing about Candace Owens that I find really interesting. And I would invite you all to open your minds and realize that all these things that she's being accused of, like anti-Semitism especially, it's just simply not true. And we've gone over this so many times in the past. We know, we can prove that that's a scurrilous charge, because if you're a faithful Christian, a follower of Jesus Christ who believes God created every man, woman, and child, created us all, regardless of skin color, doesn't matter who you are, God, our good God that we're trying to serve, created us all. It's a crazy thought that in trying to serve this God, you would also hate creatures that he's created, whether it's the Jews or the homosexuals or the black people or whatever it is, the favorite group that they say we hate in order to exploit and go after what we believe as Christians. You have to be open to the fact, as we talked about last time, it's all a lie. It's all fake and gay. You know what I mean? So there's such selective history going on right now. I saw the film Bonhoeffer the other night, and some things about it that are good. Most of it I thought was a bit of a stretch, but one thing that struck me is here's a movie done by more or less the good guys. I think it's that Angel Studios, whatever it is, and they're talking about a pastor, a Lutheran pastor who resisted the Nazis. And yet somehow, in the middle of this effort to tell the truth, they present jazz music in Harlem and sort of a Lutheran rebellious pastor as being the main thing that stood up against Hitler. And the main reason they stood up against Hitler from the 30s onwards was because of the Holocaust. Well, any historian realizes they didn't know about the Holocaust in the early to mid-30s, right? And so the movie is interesting. And the other gigantic oversight was somehow in this major film, they don't mention Mit Brennender Sorge, which means in English, with deep burning. It's an encyclical letter promulgated by Pius XI, written by Eugenio Pacelli, Pius XII, the future Pius XII, smuggled into Germany on Palm Sunday in let me make sure I get this right, 1937, okay? The Catholic Church was one of the first organizations in the world to start opposing Nazism, National Socialism, Adolf Hitler, in amazing fashion. And I've written about this, I've done videos about this, my father wrote articles about this, we have libraries full of research on this. The encyclical was not written in Latin, it was written in German for a reason. It's smuggled into Germany for fear of censorship in 1937 and was ordered by the Pope to be read from the pulpits of all German Catholic churches, right? On Palm Sunday of that year. And it attacks National Socialism, it attacks racism, it condemns the pantheistic confusion, neo-paganism of Adolf Hitler, who was fiercely anti-Catholic, right? It condemns the so-called myth of race and blood, idealizing the state. All of it is there, right? To such an extent, because they produced 300,000 copies of this encyclical letter, secretly smuggled it into Germany, ordered it to be read. Guess what happened? The Gestapo freaks out, raids the Catholic churches the next day, confiscates all the copies of Mit Brennender Sorge that it could find, closes the churches, and according to historian Ian Kershaw, an intensification of the general anti-Catholic struggle began around April in response to the encyclical letter. So then my point is, you got places like Dachau, right? You ever heard of Dachau? Dachau, the concentration camp. What was it there for? Oh, it was there for Jews, right? No, it was there for political prisoners. It was there for Catholic priests. Some 2,000 Catholic priests died there.
One of every 2 Polish priests martyred in Dachau.
They rounded up all the Catholic priests after this encyclical. They stuck them in concentration camps because of the vicious anti-Catholicism that the Nazis were all about. The church reacted with vigor against it. But then you go see a movie like Bonhoeffer, and it doesn't even mention it. It says the only reason anybody like Sophie Scholl or von Stauffenberg, who was also a Catholic, or all the priests, the Lion of Munster, the bishops, the good priests, instead of the Father Kolbes who died, that all of them, the only thing that motivated them was just this Jewish Holocaust. Well, any of them that found out about what Hitler's policy was to the Jews were against that as well. But there was so much more. There was so much more. There's anti-Catholicism, there was the nationalism, there was the racism, there was the neo-paganism that Wagner's stuff represented for Adolf Hitler, right? So much evil going on there, but nobody talks about it. And why is that? All we hear now is about how Pius XII was this, he was such a coward, he refused to do anything about the Holocaust, right? Even though he wrote, he was the ghostwriter for this encyclical that they smuggled into Germany. 300,000 copies of it to try to stop the Nazis before they got out of the gate. Do you see what I mean? I know I'm going on a little bit here, but if you look at this stuff, everything is such a carefully curated version of history that they want you to believe. And along comes somebody like Candace Owens. She's like, you know what? What the heck is going on here? What is with all this? They have all the power. They have all these people who've written the history and hung the heroes, but they cannot tolerate anyone asking any questions. Why is that? And it's a fair question, isn't it? It's a fair question, and it's been going on and on and on. Some of the most high-profile people who were killed by the Nazis, we still know their names. Father Maximum Kolbe, we know their names. Edith Stein was a Catholic nun. She was also Jewish, but she converted, became a Catholic nun, right? We have pictures, we have photographs, we have records of nuns and priests being slaughtered. But nobody gets to talk about that at all. And if you do, you're an anti-Semite. You see, and this has nothing to do with trying to downplay what happened to the Jews. The Nazis were psychotic. There was plenty of hate to go around. You see, so now I want to, just kind of use that as an example or as an encouragement. Open your mind a little bit. And when you open up the newspaper, you see the websites, or you watch a video, and they're telling you how Candace Owens now is a hater, and we've got to bar her from entering countries because she's spreading hate. Just remember, that's what they did during the Nazi era, right? They started taking whole tracks of people out who were asking questions. Candace Owens right now is concerned about what's happening over in Gaza that has as its end game to wipe out Muslims. That's what they were doing during the Nazi occupation. Only in that case, it was Jews. So how can it be that Candace Owens is the evil one here for saying, come on, man, we can't repeat that again. More ethnic cleansing? Didn't we learn something from these tilts in the 20th century where we wiped out millions of people who had different blood than ours, different skin color than ours? See, these are the questions she's asking. She's got the courage to ask. And don't think you're going to get out of this, friends. I mean, this whole thing with what's happening in Gaza is going to affect every one of us. Better make sure you understand what side of that one you're on. Okay, so we have an example of somebody now out there culturally, out in the media, some content creator, I guess they call them, who's asking a bunch of questions. And the mighty, mighty machine is crushing her and telling everyone in the world not to listen to her questions. Why is that? What are they so afraid of? She could be wrong on some of these things, but she's just asking questions for the most part. Why are they so terrified? And I want to give you this little account now, autobiographical account of Candace Owens, who was a little while ago was a liberal, and then much more recently, I myself walked with her on the pilgrimage from Paris to Chartres to come full circle, because her eyes are open, and she's willing to ask these questions, and she's willing to follow the truth wherever it takes her, even if it takes her into dark places, even if it takes her to places where life's going to get hard for her, because she's asking the questions. That's the way it's always been for those who follow Jesus Christ. You can only ask so many questions, and then all of a sudden you're facing persecution. And then the question is, how much do I believe these things? How much will I defend the truth? Am I willing to suffer for it, right? Or we're right in the middle of it. We're right in the middle of it right now. So for that, no further ado, I I want to just encourage you to watch the next, I think it's about 40 minutes, and I really want you to watch it from the beginning to the end. And I want you to think about, young people in your lives, maybe your kids, your grandkids, who need the example of somebody who's willing to ask questions and fight and stand up and do the right thing, no matter how much persecution follows as a result of that. This, then, is from the 2024 Catholic Identity Conference, Candace Owens.
Ladies and gentlemen, Candace Owens.
Can everybody hear me? Great. Thank you guys. Have a seat. Let's get started. I'm so honored to be here, and thank you so much for the invitation. And you are correct. It did come earlier than people thought that it did. So much to talk about, and I'm always like, what do people want to hear? And I guess the first thing I'll say is my life would be so much easier if I could just be quiet, I think about that all the time, just how easy it could be if I could just be quiet. And I just was never wired that way. And so many people ask, where do you get this confidence to speak out and to say certain things? And really, it comes down to just me being born. I came out like this, and it was just not that fun of a time for my parents. I was just one of those toddlers, you know what I mean? You come across these kids every once in a blue moon, and they're kind of precocious, and they think they know absolutely everything at the age of 3. And one of the things my mother always said to me, like she wanted it to be a curse, you're going to get a daughter just like you, you're going to get a son just like you one day. My issue, if it could be summed up, was just I really did not like arbitrary authority. It wasn't that I didn't appreciate authority. I could listen to people, but I didn't like arbitrary authority when people weren't explaining things. And that's sort of like early propaganda, like when the parents say things like, clean your room because I said so. Not really into that logic. I'm happy to clean my room. I'd rather you say because your cousins are coming over. But this sort of arbitrary, just because I said so, I just want my mother to explain everything to me and why I was doing something so that I could just comprehend what was going on. And especially the absolute thing that never worked on me. Every parent loved probably leading up to Christmas because your kids will just do anything, right? They'll just do absolutely anything, or Santa's not going to come, and then there's the good list, the naughty list. And my mom, if she ever used the Santa card, if you don't do this, Santa's not going to come, I would turn to them and I'd say, then you tell him not to come, Who is this guy? Who is this guy? He's going to come down in the chimney, this big, it never made any sense to me. And I did like sense. That really, really is the main ingredient for me. Just common sense is what I'm always pursuing. Something just needs to make sense, and you can explain it to me. And it's funny to reflect on things now as an adult with my own kids, because I never struggled with recognizing the authority of God. Like, God was just sort of, that made sense to me right away. And I was blessed. I grew up and spent my formative years with my grandparents, and they were extremely pious in the way that we had to study the Bible every single morning when I was a kid, and my grandfather and grandmother were Protestant, but he made a very big deal every morning, made us a huge Southern breakfast. My grandfather was from the South, even though I grew up in the Northeast, and we just speak through the scripture, and he would award us based on whoever remembered certain things about the previous day. He'd ask questions at the end. And so for me, God it was common sense. You look around the world and you're like, a human didn't do this, right? I mean, this is everything that's done, this creation. Obviously, there's something greater. And I never struggled with that. And it's interesting because that was always the one authority that I feared. I am not a big crier. Everyone processes their emotions differently. My choice emotion is not tears, so it's always a very big deal if I cry. And same when I was a child, and I remember this story, and I actually wrote about it in my book, where my grandfather, because he would do this thing, love my grandfather so much, and lost him a couple of years ago, but he would do this thing where when we were kids, if we did something wrong, he would incorporate us into the prayer, okay? So we wouldn't see it coming. He'd begin the prayer and, dear Lord. And one morning, there'd be little things you'd do wrong too, because he was all about respect. And for example, you had to, no matter how tired you were at 6 a.m. in the morning, how young you were, 6 years old, if you walked into that kitchen and you didn't say good morning, you were on his list, right? You greet people when you walk into a room, you say good morning, and sometimes you were just tired and you forgot, and that was me that morning. I genuinely just forgot. And I sat down, and you wouldn't get a plate, and then next thing you know, you're being incorporated into a prayer. But this thing that I did that I didn't know that I had done that was wrong is I got cold in the middle of the night, and I turned the heat up in the house. And I couldn't even see. I was just pressing the up button. We woke up. It was a sauna. Everyone was sweating. And, breakfast time. Good morning, Granddad, And I sat down, I got my meal because I said good morning, and then he starts praying, and he says, dear Lord, and we're grateful for this meal, and yada, yada. And please help Candace to remember to realize that she should not be touching the heat. And I was so shocked, and I jumped up, looked, and just ran. I was so embarrassed that he told God about this little minor infraction, ran upstairs, burst into tears. I mean, I've held on to this, just so we're clear, for 35 years. We never really resolved this, me and my grandfather. So then he followed me to the room and, was speaking to me through what I had done wrong. And I just remember saying to him, why couldn't we deal with this in the family court? Like you appealed to the Supreme Court right away. And why didn't you just tell me that it was wrong? And why did you tell God on me is what I said to him. And I just love thinking about that story because it's just, I did always have this deep understanding and this reverence that I didn't want to let God down, even when I was a child and even when I abandoned, because of course I went the way of the world, of course you become a teenager, of course you go into the public school system, and suddenly it's not really cool to be the kid that's close with their grandma and granddad who are super pious. Like you're trying to find yourself, and I'm getting all of these ideas, and of course it's coming from the school system, and I'm thinking like, God is just, it's not cool right now, God, it's not cool right now for you and I to hang out, sort of a thing. And I remember middle school and trying to fit in and sort of going the way of the world in all of these ways that made me just pull away from my faith. And that's kind of the blaring message. Like if you are going to be popular or you're going to be social, then you need to realize that all of this God stuff is not the way to do it. That's not what we're seeing in the mainstream. That's not what we're seeing in Hollywood. That's not what we're seeing in culture. That's not what the kids aim to be. And also at that same time, which I think is for a lot of people when you go through the public school system, I was liberal. That was kind of implied. If you got to experiment with different things. Everyone's trying out feminism and Marxism and, racism and every other ism that there is. You've got to find your camp and fight for equality. Like that's also the really cool thing to do. And it's just so funny to even picture that I could have ever been a liberal, but I was. It's just, and for a very long period of my life, and again, that's all thanks to the public school system, but even when I was still Candace Owens, do you know what I mean? So I was always pushing back in school, and I have a high school teacher who I still stay in touch with, and he messaged me and said, if anyone was going to be doing what you're doing, it was definitely going to be you. Because you were a pain in the butt, Little things that nobody bothers to teach you about. You get the test, and it's about World War II, and his name was Mr. White, and everyone just reads the question, and the question says, why did America have to drop the bomb on Nagasaki? And every child just starts answering, but not Candace Owens. I'm like, hand up, and he's like, yes, what's going on? And I'm like, I don't like this question. This question's not for me. Common sense, Mr. White. The answer is implied in the question. You're asking me why did we have to do it, which implies that we had to do it. And if you wanted me to think, you would have asked me, did America have to drop the bomb? So I was a real pain in the neck, okay? Not a fun person to have in your class. And I remember going into university, and another kind of stop along the way was this course. I was majoring in journalism and English, but you've got to take the prereqs in your first year. And I got stuck into a Feminism 101 course. and especially if you have Candace Owens, right? I mean, that's like, as your student, if you are teaching feminism, you don't want Candace Owens. And what's so funny is I would have, if you asked me outside of the classroom, I would have said I was a feminist. It really took a feminist to turn me off to feminism. You know, I had to be in the class. And I just was amazed at the lack of common sense. I mean, what an incredible class, by the way. I mean, what an incredible lesson, what an incredible study. Her job is a textbook, and I have said many times I will do the due diligence and hunt down what this textbook was called, but it's essentially an introduction to every issue a woman has ever had since the dawn of humanity. And you go through it, you pluck a problem, and no matter what, when she turns to the class and says, you know, why are women suffering or why did they suffer? The answer was always because of men. Like there was no different. If you wanted an A, all you had to do was remember that if you lost your keys that morning, it was because of men. If you were late to class, it was because of men. And it became very obvious to me that this was propaganda, that you were trying to make me believe that I just needed to hate men. And of course, I didn't attribute this to family. I didn't attribute it to faith. I just thought, this is quite strange. Like, men can't be the reason that I'm suffering every ill in life since the beginning of mankind. And I remember she used to make me, because I asked so many Candace questions, that she'd make me stay after and write on the board, I am a feminist, 50 times for various little infractions. It pained her to give me the A-. It pained her. But there was one course in particular that really stuck with me, and she was doing her thing, pulling out a random statistic, and she said, and the number was something like 85 to 89% of all women in America suffer from, or 85 to 89% of people who suffer with anorexia are women. That was like the statistic, generally speaking. And then she sort of turned around to the class and said, why? And because of men. I mean, come on, like, obviously. And I just went, okay, this is getting a little ridiculous, because I've been through high school and I feel like calling each other fat is an exclusive girl-on-girl crime. And I really said to her, like, I really don't accept this one. This is a little too crazy. And she said to me something that I will never forget. She said, Candace, I feel that you were sent to me from the men's department, right? And I said, I feel like I was sent to you from the common sense department, because it's just not possible that it's always men. And at that time, and this is why this became one of these moments I remember in my life, at that time, like as many girls who go through the 18 to 20-year-old phase, I was suffering with an eating disorder. So I was watching this woman try to tell me that it was because of men. It had nothing to do with men. It had to do with a control mechanism for stuff that had happened when I was in high school, and I was dealing with it in an unhealthy way. And yet here she was trying to propagandize me into believing that this was about men. And I asked her a question back. I said, you know, if you want to always examine statistics that way, you know, could we look into the percentage of, you know, how many people or what percentage of people are doping up for steroids to be bulky? And if that's 85%, do we say it's because of women? You know? And she just lost it. I mean, because of women, imagine that. That could never happen. But I was still a liberal, not a feminist, but I was still a liberal, you know, left college, and things really changed for me. And I realized all of this was me getting closer and closer to truth. Like, that was what I was on the pursuit of in my life. And I was willing, once I found it, to stand up for truth. So I was willing to say, like, you know, history should not be delivered to us as it was when I was in high school. We should be able to think critically about history. Got that? Great, amazing, I've arrived at little t truth. And I was willing to say that feminism is actually a form of indoctrination, and I got that. Great, I'm amazing, I'm independent, little t truth. And then I got out of college and finally engaged in politics when Trump came down the escalator, because he made everybody react. I don't care what side you were on. If you were with him or against him, you had an opinion. And I was against him. I was a liberal, right? And then I just watched the media really harp on the racism thing in a way that I had never seen it done before. And they were trying to convince me, you know, the media does this, it's almost like casting a spell. If they say it enough times, it must be true. and they were trying to convince me as a Black American, but if I didn't vote against him, like I was going to be put on a slave ship. We were gonna right away be back on plantations. And little Candace, common sense says, no, I'm gonna reject that. I don't want the guy to win, but you guys are doing a little too much here to convince me otherwise. And then I watched him give an actual speech and listened to what he said in his very Trump fashion, elevator pitch. He's like, listen, Black America, the statistics are this, the statistics, and I'm just saying, what do you have to lose? Take a chance. Do something different. And I thought, it's not the worst thing I've ever heard. He's right. We've been giving our vote to the same people. It's not the worst thing I've ever heard. But boy, did the media turn that around and say, oh, he looked us in the face and said, Black people, you are poor. I was like, that's not what he said at all. How could my trusted sources at CNN be saying this? MSNBC, I think they've just gotten it wrong. And I started wondering, wait a second, have I been believing everything that the media has been saying? Is it possible that up is down and down is up, and trusting the media as this authority is not right? And then I was very scared to do the next thing, embarrassed in front of my family, kind of got to close the door, take out your phone, make sure nobody's watching. And I checked foxnews.com, which I would have, just gonna briefly see what these racists are saying, And I thought, well, actually, they're actually presenting what he actually said. There's a step in the right direction. And the more that I read, the more that I realized that I just had no idea what was going on in the world. And I started to first go through a moment, because let me tell you, when your entire world, you're certain of that reality, and then something just undoes that, you will suffer through a period of cognitive dissonance. Am I actually going crazy? Is it possible that Republicans and conservatives and the Bible Belt, are you going to tell me that these people are not just waiting for the next Klansman rally? Is that possible? And it was possible. And then I had to go into a period of study, and that's when I started reading Thomas Sowell. And I decided to really, quite ironically, go visit all of those people that I had dismissed as race traitors and to learn what they were saying. And Thomas Sowell was really the person that changed it for me, because he created such sound economic arguments. And it was obvious to me that, wait, I've always been this way. These were always my opinions. I guess didn't know that this was how I thought. Of course I believe in these ideas. Of course I believe in a meritocracy. Who could disagree with these sorts of things? And I was like, well, this is the big one. This is truth, I've got to share it. I know it now, so obviously I have to say it. And what better time than in the middle of BLM rallies and everybody burning down the place and talking about racism for me to pipe up and say, I'm a Black conservative, yay! Not great at being quiet. I didn't know how it was going to go, so I did. I just said I'm going to launch a YouTube channel and see what happens, and just really have to share this truth, because Black Americans need to know this. We have been duped and we have been lied to, and I have to be the voice to share this because I know it. And I was blessed, and I think by my third or fourth video, it went viral worldwide, 26 million views. My whole life changed very quickly. It was like being on a rocket ship. You get the call from Fox News. Suddenly I'm working with Turning Point USA, and I'm thinking, this is amazing, because I had felt spiritually that something was missing in my life, and now I'm hitting the ground with evangelicals, and I've arrived at truth, I'm good. This is great. Everything is great. Who would want to change these circumstances, And then Kanye tweets me in and then I'm everywhere culturally, and I'm able to speak about these things that I believe in and share the truth. We've arrived at it. Great, amazing. I'm done. I'm so happy. And then I realized that was just kind of the first step, the first big step, because I'm traveling and I'm grateful, and I'm going to church again, but there are little things, just little tiny things I'm going to a non-denominational church, and I'm happy to be back in the Bible, and I'm happy to be engaging in this way, and I'm happy to be hearing from pastors every Sunday. But then that annoying Candace in the back, she's just sort of like, man, all of these churches are like concert halls, It's like Justin Bieber. It's very modern. It's very modern. And I'm just wondering, no issues. And I meet my husband, and we get married very quickly, and then he is being pulled in further into the Catholic faith. So we just agree we're just going to go to, we really did, we're just going to go to different churches on Sunday. I'm going to go to the Justin Bieber concert. Who doesn't want to go to a Justin Bieber concert every Sunday? And he's going to go, he's going to go down and go to Mass, and then he was like, you should go a few times with me, and I went, and I was like, I don't know what any of this means. Everyone's saying stuff. I don't even know what language that is they're speaking. Very uncomfortable with this, and I'm really literally have no idea what is happening. I'm like, there's objects here, this person, I don't know why he's wearing that color, why is the priest wearing different colors on different days? None of this makes any sense, and I'm not about to. Life is good, life is good. And then ever as gentle as my husband is, he recommends I read a book, and it's from Scott Hahn, and I read it, and I'm like, that's great. Still going to my Justin Bieber concert. But thank you for sharing this. Thank you for sharing this. But he's getting really compelled. He starts going to Mass every day. And I'm like, and now there's a mystery here, because there's this side to my husband that I don't know. What are you guys doing? What are you Catholics doing every day there? What could be so fun? We've got Justin Bieber, And I go a few more times with him, and I'm still completely overwhelmed. We had agreed, by this time we've got kids, and we've agreed, obviously, the kids would be raised Catholic. And I'm trying to understand more, and then I pick up a book. Well, he leaves a book next to my bedside every time. Oh, here, honey, if you're interested, this one's a good one. And this one's from Bishop Barham. And so I've arrived at, in my mind, capital T truth. And so I have realized the left and the game of the left, and it's all about division. And I'm speaking on stage all around the world about how really, when you break it all down, the chaos of what we're going through, what it is that connects transgenderism and climate change and all of these various ills, this form of paganism, is that really it's an attack on the family unit. It's all about the family unit, encouraging kids not to start families simply because the planet's going to be over in 10 years. It would be irresponsible. Transgenderism, encouraging kids to mutilate their own bodies. What chance do they have of ever having a family? Encouraging homosexuality. I'm like, I've realized it's all about the family. And a couple of chapters in to Bishop Barron's book, he writes about just the word, the devil, what it actually means, diablo, and he speaks about how it means to divide, and that when things are not whole, as they begin to separate, they become more evil. And I really, really was touched by that. It made perfect sense. It fit in perfectly. I was examining things, and suddenly it just made sense. What we are doing, and all of the political realm is just constantly dividing families. What is feminism? Dividing women from men. It's all of these little divisions, and it's evil. Of course, it's evil. What are we doing? Encouraging kids and to be away from their families, telling you're your own authority. You don't need your mom and dad to tell you what gender you are. You can just pick and be whatever you want. Of course, this isn't evil. And it really stuck with me, and I thought about that for a very long time. And then I started asking myself a question, why am I so anti-Catholic? Where did that come from? I've done a really good job of not listening to my teachers, from a very young age. So where am I getting these ideas from? And I realized that, of course, even me, even being conscious of the propaganda in school, you still fall victim to it. Why do all of the people who aren't Catholic, if we are not severely propagandized against Catholicism, why do we all say the same things? Why do we all say, they worship Mary, It's always this, all these objects, the idolatry. Where are we getting that from? So then I revisited exactly where it was that I got it from, and I realized, actually, I learned all this in school. I learned Catholics were evil, like implicitly, Catholics were evil. When I'm studying history and I'm learning about the Spanish Inquisition, every time an evil was done, it was always the Catholics. One thing you can understand, you can be a Christian, but you shouldn't be a Catholic, because historically they just did a lot of bad stuff. And I'm just sort of getting interested in that, and I'm getting interested in theology, and my husband had always said to me that it is a common expression that to become a student of history is to become a Catholic. And suddenly, I was getting interested in history. And it really takes just one lie, once you're sure that they really lied to you about one thing, for all of the other lies to become apparent. And it also takes, and this is the real secret, just one YouTube comment to make you convert to the Catholic faith. That's what happened. That's the true story. People ask, this is it. So I host, as I'm starting to get, as I call, Catholic curious, still above it. But I'll dabble. I'll see what these Catholics are doing, you know. And I invite my husband to debate a Protestant who I admire very much. Her name is Allie Stuckey, and she hosts a podcast called Relatable. And she was 100% open to doing it because she speaks every day about her faith, and she's extremely well-read. And my husband got up there, and they had their debate back and forth. And I just noticed this little thing. As they were speaking, she would say, when they'd ask a question back and forth, she'd say, I would say, well, I would say. And then George, when he was asked a question, he would say, you know, the church teaches, the doctrine teaches, the doctrine. So this was just a little slight difference going back and forth in the way that they were viewing things. And then came Jose A. Now, if you're wondering who Jose A is, I have no idea. He's a random internet commenter. But I'd like to meet Jose A someday. He comments under this debate, and I knew it was all over, and he just says, Protestantism, man, he's like, it found a perfect home in America where everything is my truth, my truth, my truth. You can make things what you want it to be. There is no authority. That's why you call it Protestantism. They're in constant protest. And this is what I thought about the left. I spent years talking about the left, and I went, oh, I'm a religious leftist. I can't bear it. And really, that was the beginning of the end. And I just started to once again wonder if I was going crazy. Am I going crazy? But the more that I thought about that, the deeper that I got into study, and the more that I really did see this Catholic conspiracy, this intentional guiding away from Catholicism that happens in America and in the West. And the more that I studied history, I wanted to call up my teacher in high school, Mr. White, and say, no, I'd really like to re-answer that question about Nagasaki, because why did we drop a bomb on praying Catholics in Nagasaki? Why did we do that, actually? I'm ready to answer that question now. And it was an interesting journey, and then I started to realize, here I am thinking that I had arrived at truth. And this was all lower T truth. If you really want to know what's going on in the world, you're being propagandized to believe it's this country versus this country. The movies are telling you, oh, it's these guys, these are the bad guys, they've got a German accent, you know, it's like there's always the villains, and it's about this country and this principle. It's very simple. It's always been a war against Christ. Everything makes sense when you understand that it's a war against Christ. And then I tweeted, rather nonchalantly, really, I was 8.5 months pregnant, and I tweeted notoriously, a day that will live in infamy, a Bible verse, and I finished the Bible verse with Christ is King. And very shortly thereafter, I was fired from my job. And I really, and if you really want to test, really comprehend how much Christ is detested, for me, I just thought, could this really be happening? Are we really right now debating? I mean, it trended for 7 days. It was amazing. I couldn't say anything, but to watch the world rise up in my defense and just go, when did we get to this point where you can't make a declaration like Christ is king. It was so eye-opening to me. It was so eye-opening to me, and I knew in that moment that I would never go back, because finally, despite this long journey and having convinced myself that I had arrived at all of these various truths, I had really actually arrived at the big one. And it was that Christ is king. And there can be no compromise. You know, I met Michael Matt. He looked very different, by the way. He had like a sweatband on his head. I did the newbie Catholic thing. I was like, I'm so excited to be Catholic. Yay, let's go on a pilgrimage. Yay. Famous last words. And I said nonchalant, my husband's like, do you want to go on this pilgrimage? Yeah, we're going to walk 16 miles. I'm like, yeah, okay. Yeah, sounds good. It's going to be over 3 days. Yeah, sure. We're going to eat bread. Okay, love it. No idea what I was getting myself into. Luckily, didn't have enough time to think about it. And I will never forget that first day, because I didn't know anything. I was just so young and excited, Catholic, and just willing to do this thing. And everyone looked so cool and prepared. And you've got these French Boy Scouts. How many people have actually done a pilgrimage before, by the way? Okay. How many have done more than one? How many have done Chartres? Okay. How many have done more than 5? Okay. These are the crazy people. Look around. Right here. We just captured them all. I hope there was a camera there. So this is 69 miles, I think it is, right, over 3 days. And I was so excited the first day, and you start, and you're in the middle of Paris, and there's this beautiful mass, and you get started, and I really just didn't know what to expect. I had no idea what it was to expect, but it's walking. Like, how hard could it be, right? And 7 miles in, I'm like, yeah, this is great. I get this. Like, I know what I'm doing. This is amazing. And then you get to the halfway point, and you're now 15 miles in on day 1, and they're passing around bread boxes, and it's hot. It's really hot. And I don't know how people are eating in the heat. And the French Boy Scouts are amazing, by the way. They're built entirely different. And they're like pulling out bread and cheese and salami. And I'm doing okay, and then we get past the 15-mile mark, and around 18 miles is when your body comes online and is like, what are you doing, Candace? You know, what are you doing? What are we doing here? And I'm aching, and I'm sore, and it starts to rain. Of course, that has to happen. And for those of you that haven't been, for each group that you're in, you have a priest. We had a wonderful Australian priest, Father Whittos, and he's just so cheery, and he says, at certain moments, the devil's going to tempt you. The devil is going to tempt you, but you just keep going, and you're going to get through it, and you're going to get to the end, and you have a little earpiece, and he's speaking, and by the way, the entire time, this is what's really incredible, the entire time it is Latin prayer. So I spoke 0 Latin at the beginning of this thing. By day 3, fluent. I can speak to any of you guys. Latin, this is easy. This is my mother tongue now. So yeah, it's raining, 18 miles in on day 1, and I am just like really starting to feel it. And now you're just in mud, so your steps are even smaller, and you're going at a sloth's pace. And this is when people start tapping out, and you've got people that are on stretchers on the sides. So you're looking, and you're like, am I going to be okay? Just look forward. I'm holding on to my husband. The French Boy Scouts are picking them up on stretchers, running happily, eating bread. I just totally maniacal. What's going on there? And then I remember, as we were getting to the last 6 miles, really at that moment, I was going, I can't take another step. I looked to my husband, and I said, if we sit, because you get these little breaks, I said, if we sit, I'm not getting back up. So we just have to keep going. You need to hold my hand, and we need to go very slowly. And I was just in my own mind. And at that point, you start having like end-of-life thoughts. Do you know what I mean? Like, are my affairs in order? And I look at my husband, and he's deep in thought. And I look at him, and I'm like, what are you thinking about? Because I'm thinking about the kids, And he just says, I'm just thinking about medieval times when they had to do this in full armor, Classic men, right? It's classic men. I'm like, okay, I don't have a partner in this. He's a French Boy Scout. I married a French Boy Scout. He's totally fine. And in that last stretch, and Father Widows, he just permanent smile the entire time. He's got dimples, just like loveliest Aussie you've ever met. And I am looking at him, and he's realizing like I'm tapping out here. And I say to him, I say, Father, like, I literally feel like I'm gonna die. And he's like, last year someone died on that hill. And it wasn't a joke. There was a cross on the side of the hill. He's like, and then people think they can administer the last rites. I'm going, I'm about to be a Protestant again. What am I doing with these crazy people? And then you make it, and when you see the camp in the site, when you get to that moment and you see the camp in the site, you're just overwhelmed with relief. You're like, I cannot believe this. I walked 26 miles in one day. I just couldn't believe I had this in me. My calves are burning. I can't sit down, but I did it. And then this voice comes on, and it's like, that was just day one. That is the moment that so perfectly analogizes how I felt when I said Christ is King. I thought I had conquered it all in politics. I'm making good money. I'm married. I thought that. I was like, there it is, the camp in the site. Everything's comfortable. Everything's perfect. Don't change anything. And now I realize in the retrospect that was all just day one, That was all just day one. And I'm going to have to do it all over again. I'm going to have to pretend that none of the things that I had done have been accomplished, and I'm going to have to really start all over again in the morning. And that's what it's felt like. But it's been a beautiful process because finally it's capital T truth. Like this is the big one. Everything else was just preparation. And so many things make sense to me now. And when you get to the end of the pilgrimage and you get to this little Chartres village and you hear the story about why this cathedral is still standing, an incredible story about World War II, where they were instructed to just shell the cathedral, burn it down because there's Nazis inside. You'd be shocked, revisit history of how many cathedrals were taken down because of wrong orders. Bad intelligence, as they say. I don't think it was exactly bad intelligence. I think there was something intentional. But this particular cathedral, there was an American general who just said, it's Christian. I don't think there's Nazis in there. And he volunteered himself and took another sergeant to go behind enemy lines. And he said, I will personally go into that cathedral and see if there's Nazis in there. And if there's not, I'll ring the bell. And he went behind, and there were no Nazis in there, and he rang the bell, and so that cathedral still stands. It's a beautiful story. And when you get on the last day of that pilgrimage and you see those spires, and suddenly all of the French in this tiny little town come out, and everyone begins to say the Latin prayer. And all of you who speak these different languages, so many different countries are involved, are all saying the Latin prayer. Then it becomes, you just are moved to tears. It becomes apparent, why we attend the Latin Mass. One holy apostolic church. In closing, I just want to express to you just how humbly I appear before you. I am so aware of just the criticism and the questions of why does she get a stage? She is a new Catholic. And, the perspective that I have is that I've never understood why God gave me this platform. And now for the first time, I do understand why God gave me the platform, because the platform is not mine. I've realized that the platform was never to talk about, to just speak about, rather, these little T truths. It was always a platform that he was building because he needed people that would be warriors for truth, that were willing to take on, that were willing to question, the narratives and to say the things when they needed to be said. And right now, there has never been a time that is more crucial for us to declare that Christ is King. Thank you guys so much for having me. Thank you.